It's a very rare circumstance when women get to peek inside the minds of men. But today's conversation, titled The Observation Glass, grants us all this unique and honestly rare opportunity to hear from the men in our lives as they share their thoughts and observations on the African American mother-daughter dynamic. We're talking spouses, significant others, fathers, son-in-laws, and brothers, all stepping forward to tell us what they really see. And as conversations like this don't usually happen in front of us, the episode is that moment when you pass by a cracked door, hear the men talking, and instead of walking on by, you pause, lean in just a little bit closer, and let yourself listen. Not to judge, not to correct, but to understand, to observe, to look through a window we rarely get access to. Now, instead of me, Kemichele, facilitating this particular conversation, I wanted to be fully present as an observer myself and invite in someone the men could relate to. So I invited a seasoned and trusted voice who has supported the Motherly Shift podcast, Dr. Eric Mason. Dr. Mason is a respected instructor at the University of Georgia with deep expertise in religion, ethics, African and African American studies, and cultural analysis. His scholarship, thoughtful approach, and ability to guide meaningful, sometimes challenging conversations made him the perfect facilitator for this special dialogue. Dr. Mason steps in today not just as an academic, but as someone who understands people, how we relate, how we struggle, how we heal. And he guides the men with insight, balance, and a gentle firmness that allowed them to open up freely and authentically. In this first installment of our two-part series, you'll hear the men reflect on what they notice, what confuses them, what amuses them, and how the emotional currents between mothers and daughters shape the women they love. Some of their reflections are thoughtful, some are surprisingly funny, and some are tender. And a few might make you press rewind just to make sure you heard what you think you heard. So settle in, get comfortable, because today, ladies, we get to eavesdrop. Welcome to the Motherly Shift.
All right, gentlemen. So, rules are simple. We're going to do it conversational style. It's okay to talk over each other, if that's okay with your style of communication. The only thing that I would not want is for there to be separate conversations where it's much harder to dig that out and to get the kind of information that you're trying to get. It'll be simple in the beginning. You'll just introduce yourselves, say a few things about your name, age, where you're from, and your religious affiliation. And anything else you want to add that doesn't take more than 10 seconds to say. Alright? And I have a few general questions that I'll just throw out for the most part. And then as you guys speak, we'll use that as a way to go into more and more things about your interactions with your significant others and their mother-daughter relationship. That make sense?
Yeah. Makes sense.
All right. I'll go first to give you a little deal. I'm Eric Mason. I'm originally from New Orleans. I'm 53. My religious affiliation is I am a Yoruba priest. And my highest level of education is a PhD. So we'll go with you, George.
Okay. George, originally grew up and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and 56 years old. I'm the oldest son. I have 2 siblings beneath me. And Baptist affiliated, I guess. My mother and father grew up Baptist or primitive Baptist, if you would say. So that's where my upbringing and environment comes from. That's it.
Thank you very much. Conti?
Yeah, my name is Conte from Flint, Michigan. Religious affiliation is non-denom. U.S. Army, retired. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. Eric?
My name's Eric, 56 years old, from Mobile, Alabama. Been here in the Atlanta area since the Olympics, 1996. My religious affiliation is pretty much non-denominational. So I guess you could say it's a kind of a long story. Grew up one way, got older, saw things differently for myself. So
Not unusual.
Yeah.
Shamar, again, originally from Cleveland, Ohio. I live in Richmond, Virginia now. I was licensed as a Baptist preacher as a teenager, ordained as an adult. But yeah, that could become a whole different conversation now. As I've gotten older, my take on religion, I do believe that positive energy begets positive energy. And so that's been the most of my application, the bulk of my adult life now.
All right. Thank you very much.
I'm Chris, I'm 53 years old, from a small town south of here called LaGrange. I've been in the Atlanta area for about the last 30 years.
Okay. All right.
And I'm a Baptist.
There we go.
Southern Baptist.
Get it right.
Yeah, I'm a Baptist.
All right. So we're going to talk a bit about these mother-daughter relationships. And you as supportive members within, usually connected to either the mother or the daughter, or sometimes both, and how you participate in that. How do you support it? How you're affected by it, particularly if it's toxic. So that's what we're gonna delve in for the most part. That was a general question to all of you. Feel free to ask. What has been your general observation about the relationships of your significant others, either with their mothers or their daughters?
So with like my wife and her daughter and or her mom?
Yes.
So with my wife and our daughter, my wife of 27 years, we have a daughter, 19 years, second year college. My observation between the relationship between my wife and our daughter is it's good. I guess if I can just keep it plain, it's good. There hasn't been too many times where I had to play the mediator. If emotions might get in the way at times, because it does. But on the flip side of that, there's an emotional side that I see between my wife and my daughter that can be embraced with celebrating their emotions. Say, for example, getting personal here, but with their menstrual cycle. Mom, I just had my first, and she just smiles and she said, let me come on in and let me talk to you type thing. So that emotional embrace, that's something that they both can experience, and I'm sure it'd be the same when it comes to motherhood, the emotional embrace. The first baby, having the first child, that emotion, but at the same time, you have this on the other side of the emotion. What I've seen is I made mention earlier, having a lot of female friends still from high school, and ask, why don't you have any girlfriends? My partner's over here, and they're like, I ain't got no female friends. And so that, I don't know when it starts, but at times, there's those times where I'll end up having to play the mediator between the two of them because I sense it. I see the emotions between the two of them, and they're both familiar with what it is because certainly my wife has experienced it with her mom. But overall, if I can say the relationship between my wife and our daughter is really good. It's in a really good place, and always pretty much on a consistent basis been that way. It's almost like a friend, especially the older she's gotten. Off to college, her own apartment, it's almost, hey, girlfriend type thing. Sure. But there's still a reverence there. So while she's not required to obey her mom, which there is that, she honors her mom now. Again, there's a reverence, there's a respect for her mom now, and she looks for advice from her too. And that's good. It's pretty good.
So, I want us to.
I'm sorry if I said too much.
No, you're doing good. I want us to think a little bit while I go to the others and talk a little bit about her response to that question. But want you to keep in mind that what does it mean to play the mediator, that content brought up, and think a little bit about when you might notice that bumping of the head starting. We'll dig a little deeper in.
Sure.
Right? Let's get back to how to what it is you see and observe about the mother-daughter relationships between your significant other and everyone's married, right?
Except me.
I'll keep saying significant other then.
Or others.
No, yeah.
That's too much.
At this age, people,
It's too much.
we keep it simple, straight to the point. So I got some references. That's a long path.
Okay, then significant other. Yeah. What have you observed about the interaction between your daughters and the significant other?
And with that said, I'll transition into the, right, when you look at how that plays out, if the mom plays a significant role in a family, right, how the daughter is prepping to become that matriarch. And those dynamics play out, and again, especially at this age, I'm mid-50s, so we recognize that we are up, right? We're the ones who will be becoming the leaders in the family, and so a lot of that dynamic for me is just trying to understand what that dynamic is. Because the one thing I do realize as determined and focused as I am a lot of times, and I want to fall into my role, trying to understand what that dynamic means and where that parameter delineates, where, okay, there is no space necessarily for my having to try to remedy anything, because there is this hierarchy that they've already established, and probably all of their lives, when you talk about mothers and daughters. And then at this age, if she's still engaged with her mom, there is this transition that's happening with them that doesn't necessarily incorporate us all the way. And figuring out where that delineation is, and how do we become more supportive in that process, as opposed to just defaulting to what we were conditioned to do as men. All right, we just get in and get it done. But there's some areas that we probably need to communicate in, babe, how you wanna move from here. And so that's been the biggest thing for me now, is realizing where to initiate those conversations.
Got it. Not dictating the terms, but more interacting.
And inadvertently, I don't consider myself a dictator. I just consider myself a bruh that will execute, that will get it. I see a need, I execute, but sometimes I find myself having to defend my position. Oh, damn, man, I didn't mean to, that wasn't my intent. And so how do you start that, try to have those conversations? Because realize, and again, I think 30 years ago would be different than at this stage, because they are preparing to become part of that, the matriarch. They're becoming, a lot of times, the women that the family leans to or look at, they feel the responsibility of taking on that mantle of taking care of everyone. And we don't necessarily, I think we have to be sensitive enough to try to have those conversations to understand how we become more supportive than not.
I think that is key stuff you brought up, particularly about the matriarchal structure. We'll come back to some of that too. Eric, what have been your observation?
One of my main observations between my wife and her mom is they are the same. They are very similar to me on the outside looking in. On the outside looking in, to me,
Is that good or bad?
they are very similar. They have a great relationship together, and I think they just about every day they talk on the phone at least for a few minutes. But at the same time, they bump heads quite a bit, because my wife does a lot for her mom now that she's up in age. She have doctor's appointment, and the mother is stubborn sometimes. But I also know when my wife wants something her way, she is very stubborn about it. but they bump heads. And also, my wife does not have any children of her own. And to me, it almost looks she's adopted her mama as her child these days. She's the one that her mom talks about. She don't know why this and why that. Mama this and mama that. Because of this and because of that, she's the one that having to take on the motherly role now. But they definitely bump heads. But it's nothing. They bump heads, but it's nothing that they, sitting there screaming back and forth at each other. I do believe there's a mutual respect between the two, because for the most part, the mom usually gives in these days. Because sometimes I think because she knows she needs help. Yeah, she knows she needs the help.
Now, my older sister, I'm the youngest. My older sister and my mom's relationship is very different than my relationship with my mom. My mother lives with my sister, so my sister takes care of my mom day and night. What I find is that what their relationship has been over the course of my sister's lifetime is what it is. If my sister wants my mom to go to a doctor's visit and my mom said, I'm not going, my sister calls me and I convince my mom to go to the appointment. But my sister can't move. She can't convince me to do anything that my mom has decided that she's not doing. But that's the nature of their relationship. She's my mom's first child. Always the experiment. So the relationship that they develop over that course of time, in my view, is what persists. Or unless they intervene themselves, unless they come to some kind of understanding about how they can make their relationship different and or better. Now, my sister's in her 60s and my mom's almost 90. I have no expectation that they're going to fix that. It is what it is. But it's not a terrible relationship. They're unlike your wife and her mom, my sister and my mom are very different people. My sister's more like my grandmother. And my grandmother was a very aggressive woman. My mom is meek. She's from the silent generation. I don't know if you guys know that. That's the generation between the World War II generation and the baby boomers. And so they came up right around the time, born right around the Great Depression. So their thing in life is they just keep their head down and do the job. They don't make waves. That's why they call it
Silent generation.
So that's my mom. My grandmother was not like that. My grandmother was born in 1917, 1914, something like that. And she's a rabble. My sister's very much like that. So my mom, her deal with my sister is, I tried to get away from my mama having all those issues, and here it is, I'm raising a child who's a rabble. So that's what some of their friction right. But it also brings me to Shamar's point about these matriarchies. So tell me a bit more about, has that been your experience with your significant others, that they are matriarchs in training in the family?
I guess I feel like my wife is that, because she is literally like the lead of their family. She has a younger brother and a younger sister. Well, her and the sister, I think they're only like a year apart. But she's literally like the mom to all of them. Her younger brother actually lived with her forever. Matter of fact, he lived with us for a while renting out the basement. And he recently moved out a few months ago. But and apparently, at least growing up for her, wherever she went, the little brother was also there. Like I say, although he calls Ingrid mama's sister. It's his sister, but it's basically his mom. So yeah, I guess you could say she's the matriarch in training at that point. But she's probably been in training for a long time for that.
So,
Yeah.
do you think that dynamic has any impact on the nature of this relationship between your wife and her mother? That you have this sort of passing of the baton. Normally, when someone becomes the new monarch, it's because the other monarch has passed away. But now we're talking about an aging monarch, an aging matriarch, while the new one is coming into existence. Do you think that might cause some of the bumping of heads? Doesn't have to be acrimonious or anything, but
Quite possibly, but from far as I know, at least growing up, I don't think the son had the best relationship with his mom. So Ingrid was the default mom or something, because she was always there. The son doesn't really, he tries, but he seems to get aggravated much easier with his real mom versus Ingrid.
okay, that's another important dynamic.
And maybe that's because Ingrid was always there. She was the one that was around all the time. Not sure. I don't know the exact story why he's not as close with his mother. I know he was very close with his father, though. But they had separated a long time ago. So that possibly has something to do with it, too, though. Yeah.
So what do you think, George? What do you think about this? Is Kim on the road to being the family matriarch?
You know what? I don't think so. I'm gonna step back to the original question. Generally speaking, Kim and I, should I say names in the podcast? Let me start over. My wife and I, yeah, we've been married about 9 years. So I come into Kim's life, my wife's life, when she was 46, 47 years old. So my experience or my perception of her mom when I came into my spouse's life is that they've always had a bumping of heads. And to me, it always seems that she did not want to be like her mom. So my experience is I've always heard negative stuff, but she always tried to be loving. My wife always tried to understand, always tried to improve that relationship, but her mom was just set in her ways. So she could never break through to develop a better relationship with her mom. So one struggle or one thing that I had to do is, because I found myself not disliking her mom because of my wife coming to me telling me all the problems she had with her mom. So that's going to affect my relationship with her mom. So you coming to me with these negative challenges you have. Right. So I recognized that early on, and I was like, okay, I can't let my wife's relationship with her mom affects how I deal with her mom.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things that I observed, that bumping of heads constantly, and I'm hearing all this negative stuff, so I've had to compartmentalize that, my relationship. It has been a challenge. I will say that because now I got to protect my wife's sanity,
Right.
and maintain a relationship with my wife's mother. So that has been a challenge for me. So as I navigate that, and I'm an introvert myself, so I'm always looking and observing things, and I'm like, damn, she right. But sometimes I try to, when she does come to me, I try to be neutral and say, you probably have to meet her where she is. She ain't gonna change. So now you're gonna have to develop the skill to manage that. And I understand there's a love of your mother. You don't want to disrespect your mother. But as you're an older woman in your 50s, you got to learn how to manage that relationship. At least that's what I'm saying in my mind and saying. You can't just always be combative and want to have that hope of changing her or whatever the case, because they've had arguments, they hang up on each other. And from a male's point of view, you ain't got to do that. And sometimes I hold my tongue. That's their relationship, and let her deal with it herself. But sometimes I may offer a suggestion or say, hey, if that's the way she is, that's the way she is. You just got to learn how to deal with it, how to manage that relationship. So, her mom, she will actually say she's the matriarch of the family on that side of the family. So she will actually say that, and she believes it. And she's gonna act it.
She know it.
She knows it.
Boy, she know it.
So from that perspective, there's an acceptance there, but I don't think my wife really accepts that title or that responsibility of being a matriarch. I think she could care less about that piece of it. That's how, just from the outside looking in, I think my role in that is just to listen. And if I hear something to where I can encourage her or to say, hey, this is not something that you should want to engage in of trying to change her. This is an opportunity to develop a skill, to navigate that, to kind of listen, and where there's an opportunity to build that love or to show that love or respect to her, take what you can take from it and do that, and anything else outside of that, somehow you got to swallow it and move on.
So I want to take the opportunity to delve a little deeper into this part. So what do you do when you think your mother-in-law is right in the interaction?
If I thought she was right, I would probably engage the conversation from a perspective point of view, because we all live in separate generations and we all accept, like, we have kids. We see things from a different perspective or a different lens than they do at their age. So I steer the conversation to understand her perspective and be able to engage her. This is her generation, this is perspective. Somehow you got to come and say, you understand this, but I would do it a certain way, or think about this, Mom, because times has changed. So some type of delicate way to say there's a different...
A real intellectual.
Yeah, it's intellectual.
I'm trying to manage that.
George is an intellectual.
Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. And some of that has become from me.
Yeah.
I try, if there's a challenge for me, I try to be aware. If I'm aware of it, I'm going to approach it from an intellectual perspective without the emotion in it.
Okay,
So
what I'm hearing is that's a huge part of your conflict resolution strategy.
yes,
Is that we take it outside of the emotional part, and then we intellectualize it, and we try to figure out.
Strategy from there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Which makes perfect sense.
Yep.
I guess along his lines right there. But at least with my wife and her mom also, when it comes to kids and their mothers, these could be two people in general. It seems to me that people with these, strong or assertive personalities, if you got two of them, they're going to bump heads. This one wants it this way, this one wants it this way, and sometimes they just not going to meet in the middle. Yeah, George, you're probably doing the best you can trying to mediate that. But just from a general observation, your wife has a assertive personality, and I can only assume her mom probably does too. Yeah. But my wife and her mom, they want something, they want it their way. And that's why they bump heads. And of course, I tell Ingrid, I was like, y'all the same person. She denies it. I say it jokingly, but I was like, but.
And as you talk about that, I think, to George's point, what I appreciate, I think our position becomes an exercise in unconditional love. So we don't expect anything back other than, like to George's point, he wanted to make sure that Kim is good first. Or he wanted to make sure his wife is good first, my fault. He wanted to make sure his wife is good first. And so that becomes unconditional. He want anything out of this other than making sure that this space stays good. And so I think that's where we can do our best job to try to stay neutral and not, because it does have an impact on us as well. Because if they're not good, we ain't gonna be good. True. But we can detach the emotion from it and go into that unconditional art. That's where, for me, that's where it kicks in to the exercise of unconditional love. And that's what I've had to learn how to lean into as an adult male is the emotions get involved when I expect something. And so lessening that expectation, I'm gonna love you because, and not necessarily want anything back. I want to make sure that this is good. Sure. That's what I appreciate hearing George talk about in this instance. Okay, I'm gonna put myself in a space where I can absorb the bulk of it, be neutral, and then unconditionally try to manage it from here.
And how effective has that been in using that?
It's been effective between her and I, but I don't think it has been effective between her and her mom. Because they constantly have this friction, and sometimes they don't speak to one another for a period of time. Although I try to help her in understanding the perspective, and like Eric said, between his mother-in-law and wife, they're gonna bump heads regardless. So they both stubborn, they have their own personalities, and sometimes it just ain't gonna work. And so I would say sometimes I'm effective, sometimes I'm not. And so that's, at that point, I've done what I think I can lend to the relationship, or lend to it. And if it doesn't work, okay. I just want you to, I want you to be okay, and we'll move on. At least between us, we will move on, and she would have, and that's her challenge. So I had to say, okay, I've said my piece. It's up to you to be able to navigate and figure out what's the best course of action going forward.
Does anyone feel responsible for managing this mother-daughter relationship?
Not necessarily responsible. It's just times, moments and times where sometimes you see it coming. Sometimes I watch my wife watch my daughter. So I see it coming. I'll see something starting to unfold. When I look in the rearview mirror, if I'm driving and my wife says something to my daughter and my daughter didn't take too well to it. And I'm looking in the rearview mirror and my daughter's got a look on her face and I'm saying to her, okay, are you just gonna leave it at that? And then my wife says, leave it at what? I says, okay, we'll talk. And so now I gotta address this. Now they talk about being strategic. Now I have to be strategic in my word. The Bible says, it talks about how a wise man ponders his steps. So I have to be careful where I'm going in this now, because now emotions is brewing. It's not always, I'm speaking only for my wife and my daughter. They have a really good relationship. But what my challenge is, and something like what George is saying, and my man being unconditional in my love and for both of them. First of all, my wife, that was a good point. But trying to see it both on both ends of the spectrum. I'm trying to really listen to what my daughter is saying and the sense that she's made about it in her mind. And then I'm trying to really listen to my wife and trying to grasp the sense that she's made about it. And now I'm in the place where it might just end up me saying, hey, look, have y'all tried taking a look at this here? Because I ain't necessarily trying to address the issue that you're dealing with within yourself or her. Try looking at it from another perspective, on the other end of the spectrum from the way you think it. Have y'all thought about looking at it this way? And then I present that. And then I sit back and now it's only left up to you guys to try to come to what it is. But I'm not trying to tell you. Now I have. Let me say this. Let me say this, right? My wife asked me, do you think I was wrong?
Oh.
I said, careful going down that road. And I said, now understand this, because I don't want this to get lost in translation.
Yes, sir.
So I said, are you all right? You really want to know what I really feel about it, because we're going to be as transparent as we can.
Yes, sir.
and a bit candid about, yes. I says, okay, all right, so I'm trying to establish this ground before we go here. I really am, right? Now, my daughter, on the other hand, I ain't gonna even front. Dad can't do no wrong. I can't do no wrong, and my wife know it. So when she comes at me, I'm trying to find a way to I can not agree with her, but at the same time, when I'm telling her, if I'm trying to point out where I believe that she's wrong, I'm also trying to make it a point where I see where, which was my daughter was saying, hey, well, my daughter is wrong. I feel it's wrong too. But here's what I think y'all should probably do. If I can, if I may, I'm asking permission, if I may. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so this is what I think. Because I'm not trying to tell you what you need to do because they try to put that out there and do it with the way their relationship is as women. I ain't never gonna be a woman. So I'm saying a situation like that, if I found myself in a situation like this, what I would probably do is then I leave it at that. So that's all I'm saying.
You know, I tried to mediate a circumstance with my ex-wife and our daughter. This is during the pandemic. My daughter came down from New York, stayed at her mom's house with my sons. My ex-wife calls me. This is the year we got divorced. So she calls me. She says, I need you to tell your kids to respect me. I said, I've already told your kids to respect you, and that if they don't, they're gonna have me to deal with. I've already done that. I'm like, but what's the problem? She said, I don't want them to go to the grocery store. This is when no one knows whether or not it's contact or whatever. I don't want them to go to the grocery store to get groceries. I want them to order from Instacart or one of the other delivery services. I said, let me talk to your daughter about it because she has significant ethical concerns with the way Instacart treats its employees. Like I told her to do it. I said, hold on. Did we not raise these kids to be free thinkers? Yeah, I was like, who do you think they're gonna try that on first?
Let me see how free they want me to be.
Right. I said, if you invite your daughter to come up with a solution to the problem, rather than fighting her, she's gonna figure out a way to make it work. There may be another delivery service that's local that she's much more comfortable with. But you haven't asked because you've insisted that she do one thing and she said no. I was like, so why don't you try that? So I called my daughter. I said, why are you beefing with your mom? She said, and I said, listen, just find a solution that works for you, that works for her. Stop butting heads over this nonsense. She said, I did find a new delivery service. I was like, okay, let's just make that happen. Now, for the most part, it was like that even while we were married. I could help to mediate, and I would also help to mediate between my ex-wife and her mom. Because they had it was clear some kind of significant emotional disconnect. They didn't approach life the same. And I understood her mom, so I would try to articulate that. Now, the worst thing I could say, Eric, is that y'all are alike. That she didn't talk to me for weeks. But yeah, that's one of the ways I tried to mediate.
So if if you don't mind, so then I'm glad you got an ex-minister over here, so y'all familiar with the Word of God. So I read a lot more than just the Bible, but the Bible says, "Fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath." And as far back as I can look over my shoulders, I don't see fathers provoking. And I'm not contesting or trying to challenge what Scripture says. That's not what I'm trying to do. All I'm saying is that in my own little small little life, I seen mothers provoking the kids to anger. And the father was always trying to be the one to say, hey, and I've never been labeled as a chauvinist, so I'm not trying to put a woman out there. And that all I'm trying to find is, I'm trying to understand is, and maybe I have to go back and search and read in context exactly where it's, so I can fully understand it. But my wife, I can't remember the last time my daughter was upset with me. And But I guess it's just the emotional thing again. And if there's, don't you roll your eyes at me? What you looking at? Who you looking at like that, girl? Who you got? And it was always that with my sisters and my mom. It was always that. And then fast forward here, I got the times where there is some fiction. And I've said some things. Listen, any parent that don't make their kids, this is just my thought, any parent that don't make their kids upset at some time, they probably ain't parenting well.
Right.
Exactly.
They probably ain't parenting well. So I'm not trying to say there hasn't been times where but maybe we have raised them a little bit to be a bit entitled. Yeah, just a little bit.
A little bit.
Right?
A lot.
But the anger and that provoking the child to is just, I don't know. Maybe y'all can just help me understand. Maybe y'all can help me understand that.
It's not scriptural confusion. I think it's become a cultural confusion over the last 75 years or so, where women have felt like they had to be the strength.
Okay.
They had to be the ones that again, I don't know if it's a societal thing or bros fell off. I know for my own family, my own familiar, I have a lineage of extremely strong matriarchal system in my family.
So have you seen that, what I just said?
Yeah.
You've seen it?
Yeah, because we were raised in it. And so then there was a degree of, I talk about a lot of my male cousins now, as we talk about how we support women in this instance, but it also goes back to how we were influenced as young men. I always appreciated the fact that, I love the fact that George's father was so engaged, when my father was not. As a young cat, Mr. Moore, all my accomplishments, I wanted George's father, when we were playing sports, when we were coming up, I appreciate the fact that George's father took notice of me coming up, because I didn't have that aspect of it. I had all these. But I also recognize that I feel like a lot of women, I come from a very strong Southern background, and women I think they felt like they had to also exert some degree of discipline.
Yes, sir.
And that wasn't necessarily that was their natural influence, but they felt like there was an absence of that, and so they had to. And so my sister, all the female cousins, had a little edginess to them because of the way my maternal grandmother was all that I knew of love. My paternal grandmother was all I knew of discipline.
I would like to add a little sociological context.
Sure.
And a little cultural context. There are no ethnic groups on the planet where women are meek. It does not exist.
I believe that.
And or that they are not incredibly assertive in the management of the family and the like, it does not exist in any place, no place where you go. My Pakistani and Emirates friends will talk about who actually runs the household, no matter who has money. And so it doesn't matter where you go on the planet, you're going to find that kind of thing that exists. We could even argue that if we're looking at European societies, that if you take it outside of looking at the royals and look at the peasantry and the serfs, women ran the show. The only idea where we have women of leisure, stay-at-home moms, is among the nobility and the aristocracy. Every other place around the world, women have always worked.
Yeah.
And what we have gotten into in America is we have idolized the aristocratic lifestyle as if that is what has been the norm. And it has never been the norm.
Yeah.
Even when you can point to the statistics that shows that prior to World War II, between 60 and 80% of the household women did not work. That's what it would say. But that means that they didn't work outside of the house. Didn't mean that they didn't wash clothes for other people. Didn't mean they didn't press. Didn't mean they didn't do.
Maintain the basics.
I'm talking about for other people.
Right.
Didn't mean they didn't wash other people's
Right.
clothes.
Maintain the basics.
So they made money in those ways that they brought into the house.
The fundamentals.
And when we look at African American households in particular, what we notice then is that most of the men were in positions as artisans, in some form of construction, bricklayers, roofers, all of those kinds of roles. Most of that was seasonal work. Okay? That was definitely not enough money to keep everything running most of the time.
Yeah.
So women normally had very steady money when they doing the job that they were doing that allowed for them to maintain all of the baseline things, which is why Dad could come home on Christmas with all the gifts because that's what his money paid for, but it wasn't generally paying for all the baseline stuff. So I just wanted that to add when we're talking about the matriarchy, that it's not out of kilter with how most societies were functioning anyway. Those kinds of instances that exist around the world. So this idea that you might find the matriarchy in African American households is not strange.
Correct.
It's just a continuation of the way the world is mostly functioning. Even if we pick Jesus' household, right? Most depictions of his household is that Mary is making decisions.
Correct.
Mary comes along and said, Joseph, I've gotten this visitation that I'm having this child. Joseph's not leading any of that. He's not making the determination. The best decision he can make is whether or not he's going to stay or leave. Yeah. That's all he got. And then every other interaction that's happening is between Mary and Jesus. You don't hear the interactions after he's 12 years old with Joseph. To the point that folks have argued that Joseph is dead. And they have no proof to demonstrate.
No historical truth.
So what we have is Mary is clearly taking a very prominent role, such that even the apostles acknowledge her position in Jesus' life. You could argue that's a matriarchal kind of positioning in the New Testament. Right? So it exists everywhere. There's no place where women are completely silent, no matter how much Paul might have wanted. But so I do have, because the fact that Conte, you brought up the distinction between your spouse's relationship with their mother as opposed to the spouse's relationship with your daughter, because that engagement is different, right? Because you have a different level of involvement, a different level of things at stake that are not the same, because you didn't meet your spouse's mom until she was in your life. But the spouse and the daughter maintaining this relationship and the family not fracturing, that's important.
Oh, yeah.
And have the rest of you seen and interacted with this kind of thing with regards to your spouse and their daughters? All right? So we've been spending our time talking about this mother-daughter relationship and how as men, as husbands, as fathers, and son-in-laws, we've engaged in that and tried to find ways to help alleviate it if we found it to be toxic, and how it's affected us in our relationships.
In my case, my mother-in-law and my wife, they have a pretty good relationship, but sometimes they bump heads. She only had daughters around the table. They all having their conversation, and all four of them, they constantly bump heads, and sometimes I have to just tell my wife, hold it. Because they'll sit there and they'll go back. But for the most case, their relationship is pretty good, and it affects us to the point to, like I say, sometimes when her and her mom going back and forth, I have to, hey, that's your mom. And in my case, I was raised by old school. A lot of times, what mom says is always right. They'll go back and forth, and it just get out of hand sometimes.
One of the things we were talking about is the idea that some of the daughters are matriarchs in training.
Yes.
And whether or not that may have some bearing on this sort of tussling, because we can all agree that some of it is power dynamics.
Yeah. I think when you come to that struggle, I think a lot of times the daughters have watched their mom do a certain thing for so long, and then they feel next woman up. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you ran it. Now it's my turn to run it. Sit back. I think a lot of women has that mentality too. Was that pretty much the same y'all was thinking?
Kim, I don't think she aspired to be a matriarch. But as I'm listening to everybody, one thing that comes to mind is that, at least in my case, as I've said before, I've only been involved in my wife's life experience for 9 years. She had 40-some years between her and her mom. So I'm looking at it from a 9-year perspective, while my wife has been dealing with her mom for 46, 47 years.
Yeah.
So she has a longer life experience of dealing with her mother than me as an outsider looking in from a 9-year perspective. And I think the same thing goes with her daughter. We were both married before us getting involved. So I've known my wife with her daughter, with her kids for those 9 years. So as she was raising them as a single mom or with a prior husband, she had those experiences, those life experiences that may affect how she's dealing with her children now with me. So I think that's important to say, okay, I've only been observing this relationship for a smaller period of time than what she has been. And what I've observed is that between my wife and her daughter, I think she has become, which I disagree with.
Careful.
Be careful. We always talk about parents being friends with their child, and I see that with my wife and her daughter.
So she's become one of her little friends.
Yeah, as a friend, as opposed to a parent. She has her parent moments, but overall, I see that dynamic between my wife and my daughter versus I don't think she was ever friends. My wife was ever friends with her mom in the same respect. So I don't know if that plays a role as far as I'm bumping heads with my mother for X amount of years. When I have my daughter, I don't want that relationship with my daughter. So I'm gonna have a different approach. And right or wrong, whether the approach is right or wrong, that's what she chose to do, how she handled that relationship. So here again, I gotta look at it from a different perspective, hopefully an intellectual perspective without the emotion. So when you're dealing with her, see things, and again, sometimes I gotta hold my tongue because I was not in the trenches while it was all happening. So it's about perspective. So I can't always give my opinion freely because I wasn't there. I wasn't there. Exactly. So it's a line you have to be aware of, I guess. You have to be aware of when you want to offer opinion or suggestion, because it's all about perspective.
But you know enough to know that you don't know. So
Exactly.
leave well enough alone.
Know enough, leave well enough alone. And if it comes to a point there where it's affecting your relationship, I'm gonna say something, but I'm gonna give a caveat. Hey, this is what I see, and this is why I'm saying it. At least I try to, instead of being emotional and getting upset and then spewing off. So that's one thing that, as men looking at those relationships, whether it be from the mother-daughter or mother-in-law and mother-daughter, you have not always been in those shoes. And in my case, I have a limited amount of time exposure to it versus we haven't been together for 30 years to where I have more years in it.
So do you guys think that these mother-daughter relationships mirror father-son relationships? Or are those qualitatively different too?
Qualitatively different.
I think it's totally different.
It's
A mother and daughter relationship versus a father-son relationship. I think it's different.
As we close out the first half of the observation glass, We've heard honest, thoughtful, and at times humorous reflections from the men who love us, watch us, and sometimes quietly survive the emotional tides of the mother-daughter relationship. Their perspectives have given us a fresh insight, showing us how our dynamics shape homes, marriages, parenting, and even the way they understand womanhood. This conversation has already opened a door many of us never realized was closed, and it's been both enlightening and affirming to listen in. And trust me, we're only getting started. In part 2, the men go even deeper, sharing the moments that challenge them, the emotional truths they often keep to themselves, and the wisdom they've gained from observing the women in their lives. Their revelations, laughter, and a few unexpected truths you won't want to miss. Join us next week for the continuation of The Observation Glass on the Motherly Shift podcast. Have a great week.